Hi class, my name is Angela Rogers and I am here to present to you the development of kicking from birth to death. I am in Dr. Garrett's Kinesiology 332 class, and today we're going to just talk about the motor development, specifically of the fundamental skill called kicking. So first we're just going to go ahead and define motor skills. What are motor skills? They're defined as fundamental or fine movements that are stimulated by the brain that controls specific areas of the body. So our brain and our central nervous system controls movements that we do, such as eating, throwing, writing, kicking, etc. When you read a little bit about it and you research, you understand the brain and what parts of it control our movements and our everyday skills. The primary motor cortex and spinal cord work in conjunction together, and they secrete stimuli which contract and control muscular movements. So one of these movements is called kicking, as you all know. It's defined as a highly specialized form of striking, according to research. Plays a huge role in education, sport, and free play of children's lives. You see youth sports and beginning sports, all including soccer, and other forms of kicking that are utilized every single day by mainly children, toddlers, young adults even. Fundamental motor skills are mastered by the age of 2 and refined up to the age of 14. So kicking also slowly regresses with age, as we'll talk about later. Kicking is generally noticed by infants in the womb. So pregnant moms will be able to tell you this, that they are constantly kicking inside of them, but there's actually no purpose or goal to their movement. By 18 months old, after birth, they generally walk into a ball. So with the labs that we've done in this class, you got to see that a child, a really young child at 18 months or even younger, generally if you watch them try and kick a ball, they're basically mimicking what you're doing. So they're not really kicking the ball, they're just walking into the ball. Moving on to 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds can kick a ball a full circumference or more, according to research studies. So they don't actually have the full knee and hip flexion and extension kind of stuff going on, but they have the ability and the capability to go ahead and kick the ball a full circumference, which means it'll just roll one time forward at least. So the full movement of kicking includes flexion of knee and hip, followed with extension of the knee and hip, in which the ankle will dorsiflex at the execution and therefore striking of the object. This type of motor skill is very, very apparent by the age of 4. So you'll see the leg, flex back and then extend forward to go ahead and strike the ball by the age of 4. So moving on to toddlers, they generally have a mature kicking pattern by the age of 5 or 6. So as mentioned before, at the age of 4, it's very apparent that the toddler is trying to acquire this type of skill. So by the age of 5 or 6, kicking is generally mastered, and it's able to show physically the movements backward of the leg and hip, forward, and striking of the object, which at this age is really significant because they generally join elementary school by the ages of 5 or 6, and a lot of physical education programs include soccer as one of the sports to learn. So learning kicking by this age allows them to participate in this kind of sport whether or not they're very good at it. Also at this age, the maturing of the central nervous system is still going, so it results in better motor control during childhood, and it generally makes them want to be more physically active because they're recognizing all these movements that their body is capable of doing that they wouldn't have known before. So this is a very big milestone when children learn, and especially toddlers learn, how their motor skills are effective every single day of their lives. Moving on to teenagers, fine motor development hits a lull by age of 14. What I mean by fine motor development is small skills such as writing, eating, knitting, all that kinds of stuff, anything that involves generally refined small motor movements. These hit a lull by the age of 14, so they are generally done developing by this time. However, gross motor skills continue to develop, especially in males. So gross motor skills meaning kicking, throwing, jumping, running, all of these things are still continuing to develop because we use them every single day. So what I mean by especially in males is not trying to discriminate against females. It's males have a higher level of testosterone and are recognized as being a little bit stronger and have more muscle mass than females. So males that continue to utilize these fundamentals will generally continue to develop, whereas females will develop maybe a little bit slower, or if at all. They still use them and they're just generally very fit, but not necessarily developing better motor skills. So they keep like I said, they keep these muscles active and healthy throughout high school. They participate in sports. They're just very physically active. So it's not a surprise that teenagers have a good peak of motor development during this time. So on to adulthood. Motor skills begin to regress in early 20s unless participation of activity or hobby requires the skill. So this is kind of self-explanatory. Basically, young adulthood, anywhere from 19 to the early 20s. According to studies, motor skills generally start to regress at this time. So unless you're participating in a hobby or activity or sport or something that requires you to kick or to throw or to jump, then normally these skills will just kind of stay at bay, and if not, slowly start to regress. The brain is fully developed and matured. Experience increases specific areas of the brain. So the more you use these parts of your brain, the longer they will last, and it'll slow the process down of regression. The neural groups remain strong and secrete synapses for movement, and sometimes genetics play a role. So if you have a family history that, maybe a family member had an issue with the part of their brain that's developed for motor skills, and they had an issue with it, sometimes that can be passed along to you, which impacts your motor development overall. So you don't really see this too often, but it does happen. So adulthood is kind of the part where it starts to slow down and you start to realize that your movements aren't as good as when you were younger, let's say no longer 15. I chose to continue adulthood because it's kind of a big part of our lives. You're, over 18 and up until you're an elderly adult, adulthood is the biggest part of our lifespan. So talking about motor skills and kicking in particular in adulthood, it's not a main focus during this time period in our lives. We obviously have fine motor skills that, we're always writing, we're always eating, and we're always touching and typing and working and whatever else we're doing. But kicking, you don't really see too much. Obviously, professional soccer players are an exception. USA teams, all that kinds of stuff. They're just professional athletes, which require kicking to be utilized every single day. So clearly, their regression is not going to be as quick as the normal average person. Fine motor skills have a slow regression, but are used more in daily life, which means that they last longer. As stated before, writing, eating, typing, etc. Gross motor skills less likely to be used. Less use of fundamental motor skills may result in immobility. So, this leads me on to elderly aged, which is considered any adult over the age of 60, especially kicking, very difficult at this age. So the brain is just slowly deteriorating. It kind of is just old age, and your body can't function as well as it did when you were younger and healthy and new and fully developed. And so about that time, elderly people do not generally kick or do anything remotely involving lower extremities except for walking. So kicking is a rare movement at this age due to bone health, loss of muscle mass. Basically, it's common sense. Elderly people just generally do not kick. So unfortunately, you just undergo at this age, any kind of motor skill is just slowly regressing, and you begin to see some deterioration of brain cells. So just to summarize what we talked about today, in conclusion, infants younger than 18 months kick with no purpose and learn kicking by the age of 2. Toddlers master kicking by age of 6 and is refined by the age of 14. Continuous use of kicking muscles slows down process of motor skill regression. So as long as we keep using the knee and the hip and keeping these muscles active, it slows down the process of motor skill regression. Adults begin to use gross motor skills less and less. Regression begins and motor skills are less effective every single day unless, like I stated, you participate in an activity or hobby that requires these skills to be used, which goes back to being, practiced, and the neural groups are continuing to send out stimuli that want us to contract and use these muscles. Kicking is rarely used at an elderly age, and brain function regresses, motor skills deteriorate, and eventually, due to elderly age, bone health, muscle mass, illness, etc., it eventually leads to immobility. So just some questions for everyone to think about for our peer collaboration. How do we maintain our motor skill function past adulthood? Does physical activity play a role in the health of fundamental motor skills? Why is it important to understand the nervous system and brain function that control our motor performance? So all of these questions are answered in my presentation, and I really hope that you all enjoyed this. I enjoyed this class and learning about motor development from infantry to adulthood. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.